Hey everyone, welcome to the UX Rocket interview series where we get to hear and learn from industry experts on issues and topics related to UX design. Recently, I had the great privilege to speak with Lisa Murnan, who is a very highly experienced UX designer and UX leader, having worked with companies such as IBM, Bank of America, and Ally. Currently, Lisa is the Senior Principal Product Designer for Dell SecureWorks and is the author of the book, How to Get a UX Design Job, Create a Compelling Portfolio, Submit a Standout Application, and Ace the Interview to Land Your User Experience Dream Job, which is a really good resource for anyone who is looking to either enter into the UX design field or others who may be just looking to take that next step in their UX design career. I hope you enjoyed this interview. Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about your book and about UX design in general. I know that you are involved in a lot of things and you're a very busy person, so I really do appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to do it.
So to start, I guess, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe a little bit about your background and some of the work that you're involved in.
Sure. So I've been doing this UX thing before it was called UX for about 25 years. I actually was an English major in college and I went to work for a newspaper right out of college. And I was in the research department. So I did a lot of LexisNexis kind of searches and that sort of thing. And in 1994, they decided they wanted to put the newspaper online. So they took anybody who had any computer knowledge at all, they put us in new media and they said, put the newspaper online. And so that was my introduction to the web. HTML, Photoshop, like all that good stuff. And from there, I just went into a completely different direction, into the whole wild west of the web instead of newspaper, which actually I'm really thankful for today, considering kind of the state of newspapers. And my career kind of progressed. I was a webmaster in 95. I went to work at IBM, and then I went to work at, where did I go from IBM? To an e-business consultant in New York City, like right around the dot-com boom and then the dot-com bust. So I was a millionaire on paper for about 6 months, and then I had, the stock was worth nothing. And then let's see from there, Bank of America, TI-CREF, Ally Financial. And I didn't really mean to be so much in financial services. And what's funny is even though I was in financial services, I was not working on financial services. Like at Bank of America, I worked on the intranet site, Flagscape. At TI-CREF, that kind of, that was my first actual UX title. I was a UX lead at TI-CREF, and that was about 10 years ago, 2011.
Wow.
Ally, I actually worked on mortgage stuff. I worked on auto dealer stuff. I worked at Active Network in San Diego for a year or so, and then back to Ally. And then I know this is kind of a rambling intro, but I'm at SecureWorks now, which is part of Dell Technologies. I've been there for 6.5 years. It's a cybersecurity company, super complex workflows, really interesting users. Really cool industry in general. I kind of feel like I'm part of Super Friends a little bit, like keeping the hackers away. So that's why I've stuck around so long. And you probably will ask me about that later, but I feel like I'm always growing and learning there still. So it's been a cool place to be. So, and I also did some teaching. I taught a certificate program in Boulder Digital Arts for 2 years, wrote my book right after that, How to Get a UX Design Job. And then I started coaching because people were like asking me a lot of personal questions on LinkedIn and stuff, like, how do I do this, personally? So I think I've coached over 100 people in the last 2 or 3 years. I've already done like 40 this year because this year's been crazy.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. I do about 3 a week, and that's about all I can handle, just with my current full-time job, but it's cool. I meet a lot of interesting people that way.
What a journey. Holy cow. So
the web is a cool place. It's still the Wild West in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So taking a little bit of a step back and talking a bit more about the field of UX design in general, how would you define UX design?
It depends on who's asking. Since you're asking, and this is like a UX podcast or a program, I mean, the whole Don Norman, when he was at Apple, he defined UX. He was the first one with the UX title. He defined it as like the end-to-end experience that someone has with the company and the product and the services, like everything. And he even explained it like you go to the store, you buy an Apple computer, you try to fit it into your car, you get it home, you set it up. Like that whole thing is user experience. At my company, user experience is like researching, designing, and testing, and then producing the final designs for our product, for our SaaS product. We have a customer experience group that's separate that actually talks about like the end-to-end, how do you build customers? How do you onboard customers? Like that sort of thing. And we're separate from them. If my parents ask, it's like web design or software design, something like that. So it just really depends on who. UX design is so vague and broad. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be, when you talk about user experience, I mean, gosh, that could be almost anything the customer touches. So the new thing now is kind of calling it product design, which you might see in job descriptions, and you'll look and you're like, other than the title, these things are identical, practically. But I kind of like product design because that's really what I do is I design a SaaS product. I don't design entire company-wide experiences. So
in a typical company, and maybe a mid-sized company, what's the role, kind of the day-to-day activities of a UX designer?
I mean, it really does depend on the company. It varies so much depending on how big the team is, how specialized the roles are. But at my company, what I would do is be involved in any kind of little ad hoc kind of thing, from like, let's add a button, to something big, like let's create an online onboarding experience for new users. So it could be really tactical or really strategic. The tactical stuff may just take a couple of days, in Figma or whatever, kind of working with a few people. The strategic stuff could take a whole quarter. And that's when I really put the process into place. Like, I'm not going to do the whole discovery, define, design, whatever for a button. Yep. But when it comes to onboarding, we would have like a discovery phase where we do a lot of research, competitive analysis, define, where you kind of figure out what screens am I even going to build or change, design, obviously, sketching, wireframing, prototyping. We do testing. We do a lot of usability testing where I work. And then we clean it all up in Figma and hand it over to our UI developers, who's a separate team. That's how it works at my company.
Kind of a side question on the usability testing. What do you guys use for that?
Well, we do both moderated and unmoderated. We did user testing for the past year, but the people that use my product are security analysts, and they are super cagey. Like, if you go on LinkedIn, they have little gray profile heads, and maybe they don't even use their last name. Like, they really are very difficult to recruit. So finding them on usertesting.com is really hard. Yeah. So what we usually have to do in user testing is test, like, kind of common patterns that maybe just a really technical person would understand, but they don't have to be a security person. We do a lot of moderated testing, where we have, recruiters finding people on LinkedIn and pulling them in for us. We have a group of customers that we can reach out to. And we have a lot of internal analysts as well at our company, like hundreds of security analysts that work internally. So we can actually tap them too. But we do, I think we're switching to user Zoom this year. I don't user testing, sorry. But I think we're switching. You don't have to.
No, that's really interesting. That's a good idea to have a recruiting team. I mean, it's Dell, but I mean, even smaller companies to have a recruiting team, kind of finding people on LinkedIn to do those moderated testing. That's a great idea.
Yeah, we have one dedicated researcher, and we're hiring 3 more right now. So, I mean, it's growing like crazy. But yeah, he's only one person. There's only so much he can do. So he works with external agencies, and they do a really good job of finding people on LinkedIn, talking back and forth with them. We do give them compensation, for talking to us for an hour, but they've been really great.
Yeah. So you mentioned product designer, you just mentioned UX researcher. And what are some of the various positions that you can fill, that are being filled in the field of UX design?
Yeah, I mean, mostly you'll see UX designer / product designer. And like I said, to me, they're very, very similar. Maybe a product designer needs to have a little more visual design skills than, maybe it kind of depends on if you're going into a startup or something, they kind of want you to do it all. And if you're doing something more enterprise, then maybe you're just going to produce wireframes and hand them off to a visual designer. So there may be a separate visual designer role in some of the bigger companies. Some Sometimes you see, this is kind of getting rare, but like an information architect role where that's all they want you to do is pretty much just, build structures and flows and that sort of thing, interaction design. But truly I'm seeing, well, UX writers, I'm seeing that a lot more. When I was at Ally, which was back in 2014, we had content strategists and they were assigned to every project and they helped, with the tone and writing all the content copy. My product hardly has any copy because it's a cybersecurity product. So it's like, we don't really need somebody to do that. But a lot of roles are coming out now, where I see UX writer. UX researchers, it's pretty much, they're kind of expecting people to do a lot of the end-to-end work now, though, not so specialized.
Mm-hmm. And so I know it varies based off the type of work you'd be doing, but in general, what skill sets or passions would you say are kind of the prerequisite to be successful in this field?
Well, I mean, the hard skills, you obviously have to be able to solve problems and, really know the best practices of interaction design, like how should things be put together on a screen, like Luke W's, how to do a forms book, you should be familiar with that kind of stuff. Because if you can't design a good screen, then you're in trouble, in our industry. But in terms of like soft skills, you have to be a good presenter, good storyteller, being able, I know that's kind of a cliche, the storytelling, but it's true. I mean, you really do have to be able to, we always say, like, if people are multitasking during your presentation, then you need to work on your presentation. So we're always trying to make it funny. We put, interject little pictures and gifs and things like that in there. You have to be, empathetic is another one of those overused words, but you do have to have a user mindset and be the advocate for the user. So you have to really think that way. Strategic and tactical, you need to think about if what you're doing is really helping the user in the business, and not just be like oh, sure, I'll build that feature and not even ask why. Like, why are you building the feature? Challenging. Are you sure this is the right problem that we're actually trying to solve? So it's kind of a mix of skills, and it does depend. I mean, if you're a researcher, obviously you've got to be pretty good talking to people like this. Yep. Moderating, which I think is so boring. I hate moderating. I love listening to the calls, but moderating with a script 10 hours in a row, whatever, like, I don't know how they do that. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. So UX is clearly, it's an emerging field. And you've been doing it for, you said 10 years ago, you were a product lead. A lot has gone on since then. Why are companies seemingly now valuing this sort of work? And I guess my question is this replacing any current efforts or other efforts that had been previously done in companies? And I just wonder because, if a company is investing resources towards UX design, my thought would be that they're pulling those resources perhaps from somewhere else. So do you have any insight on that?
That's a good question. I'm not seeing them pull from anywhere else, but I am seeing them free up budget for, like actually recognizing that UX is important. I mean, in my own company, we've grown from 3 people to like 12 or 14. Like it's hard. I'm iffy on the numbers because we're hiring right now. We're trying to hire like 7 people. So, I mean, our team is growing like crazy, but I don't see anyone getting displaced really. Right. And actually, I mean, this has been evolving for a really long time. Ever since the iPhone came out and people are starting to, consumers are starting to expect things to work well and look nice. And I mean, just even this past year and a half with the whole COVID thing and everything's moving online, people are expecting to have a good experience online with their unemployment stuff or their healthcare or even Zoom. Like, you're starting to see things really become more consumer focused because everybody's doing everything online right now. And I think companies recognize that there's true value there, that the experience matters.
Right. So I guess kind of a follow-up question is why, or I guess what are the greatest challenges companies or teams are facing now in executing a good user experience for their users?
I mean, a lot of it is the remote work. At my company, we've always worked remotely. So I've been remote for 6.5 years, no problem. But a lot of companies are trying to figure this whole, how do we collaborate? How do, do we meet? Do we talk on video or do we just, talk without video? I used to hate video, but now I can't imagine having meetings without video. We use Miro all the time. It's a online whiteboarding like Mural, and now Fig Jam, just came out. But we use that all the time to collaborate. So I would think like collaboration might be a challenge. There's always new tools coming out. Like Figma is the newest, hottest thing. That's what we use. Also, it really depends on the company. So at my company, we definitely have a seat at the table. We work really closely with product management and engineering, and we actually help drive the roadmap and say, I think this needs to move out and this is more important for the users. But at a lot of companies, that's not the case. At a lot of companies, they basically just tell you what to build and you build it. And so I think that's always going to be a problem, is like being able to push back and say, but why? Or is this the right thing to do? That whole like lipstick on a pig thing. Like, do we really want to just make this look better or add this screen when really we should be fixing this thing over here that doesn't work? I do that all the time. That's, asking that question. Are we really solving the right problem right here?
Well, that's the right question to ask. I guess I'm curious, just you mentioned Miro and others. Who participates in those sessions typically? Is it just your kind of core team, or do you sometimes invite outside people to participate in that?
Oh, it's growing like crazy. So it used to be that only a small group had, like the product team had access to Miro. They just opened it up to our whole company, which is thousands of people.
Yeah, wow.
And so, and even though, and some of them use it more than others, but we started inviting like product support, and we have customer success managers. There's like 20 of them that work right with customers. And we started inviting them in, and we started inviting subject matter experts, and we'll put screens up and we'll kind of talk through our ideas and have them, like we just did this was an experiment, but we just did a usability report, kind of a readout. And instead of doing this one-to-many slide presentation, which is really dry, just reading a lot of slides, we did it in Miro. We put all the screens that we tested in Miro. We did video clips, about 30 minutes worth of video clips. We let everybody listen to the video clips and put like things that they heard up on Miro. And then we had an hour-long discussion, kind of like a workshop, which was really cool. It's really collaborative.
Yeah, it's really creative. It's a good idea. Yeah. So let's turn to your book now. Your book is How to Get a UX Design Job. And then the subtitle is Creating a Compelling Portfolio, Submitting a Standout Application, and Acing the Interview to Land Your UX Dream Job. And
that's really good. I'm glad you didn't make me do that on memory.
And I have to say, I read it, and it's just so practical. And it really does do a really good job on, guiding you on how to craft a portfolio, and you provide specific tools you can use to do so. You talk about what employers are looking for in an application. You provide a large list of potential interview questions, along with who you may be speaking to throughout the interview process and what their experience and mindset may be at that time of the interview. There's just so much there. So I guess my first question is, why did you write the book?
Well, when I was teaching the class for 2 years at Boulder Digital Arts, it was funny. It was like a 5-day class. It was on Sundays. So that's one reason I stopped teaching, because it's like my Sundays were getting destroyed. But on the 5th Sunday, I was supposed to be talking about kind of how career decisions and, where you would fit in and the kinds of things you might want to look for. And it would turn into an all day, like, how do I get a job? What should I do on LinkedIn? What should my resume look like? What should my portfolio look like? And it just turned into this. And I thought, gosh, this is, and I kept just putting up Google Drive stuff for them to go get. But I thought I should just write this book, because just dump all the stuff from my head into this book. And then also it wouldn't just hit 30 people a year. It would hit a lot more than that. I could put it up. So it's kind of one of those, I didn't really plan to write it, but it just kind of, it was a project that I just decided to do over kind of like Christmas, the holidays, and popped it out there. I self-published it. So I've sold about 1,000 copies. I don't know exactly how many, but I sell it like a copy a day. So I know, so it's getting out to somebody. So that's cool. Well,
it's really good. Like I said, it's just so practical, step by step, like do this. And one of the things in your book that you talk through was, how to obtain it when you're obtaining a job. And I guess it's of course geared towards UX designers, but I guess the principle could be outside of UX design, is doing it as a UX design project in and of itself. Right. So can you talk through that a little bit and why there's value in approaching a job search that way?
Sure. So we are really good at being UX designers and researchers are really good about, being empathetic to our users and thinking about our users until it comes to our coworkers or people maybe in the interview process. Suddenly your product manager, you're not thinking about them the same way you'd be thinking about a user, or like the engineering guy, you're like, oh, he's so curmudgeonly, but you don't think about him like a user. And I think the same thing kind of happens. It all goes out the window when we're talking about recruiters or hiring managers or people like that. So I just, we kind of create things for ourselves a lot of the time, our portfolio or whatever. And so I just want people to really focus on who's going to be looking at that and why are they going to be looking at that? How long are they going to be looking at that? And make sure that you're giving them what they need versus kind of what you want or what a boot camp's telling you to do or whatever. So that's the main thing. And also just as UX people, we're kind of used to thinking about things in terms of like, first you do discovery, you do research, you do competitive research, you look at other people's stuff and you kind of figure out, okay, and then what am I going to build? And then you build it. I think of job hunts as kind of usability tests. If things don't work, just try something else. I tell coaching people that all the time, like, stop taking it personally. It's not personal.
Right.
They don't even know who you are. Just try something different if your resume is not resonating, or if your portfolio is not resonating, or if your presentation's not, you just try something else. So it's kind of like testing all the time.
And you kind of just brought it up in the beginning there. You in your book, you talked about the various personas you may be coming across in the interview process. Could you talk through maybe one or two of those personas and maybe how you'd prepare to interact with these different individuals?
Yeah, sure. So the recruiter would obviously be the first one. And they're going to be, most of them aren't that UX savvy. There go my dogs. Most of them aren't that UX savvy. They may know a little bit if they're a specialized agency that recruits UX people, but in general, they're going to be kind of looking for culture fit. They're going to be talking to the hiring manager and asking them what they're looking for and kind of just reflecting that back. So when they ask you questions on the phone, it's usually going to be a 30-minute screener before you ever talk to anybody inside the company. They're going to be asking eye-level questions like the whole, like, tell me about yourself. Do you have to have an answer for that one? They're going to ask you questions like, tell me about a time when you did user research on a project, and you'll think, gosh, that's like my whole life. But you just have to have an answer ready for that kind of stuff. So that's your recruiter, and they're usually going to be trying to help you. They want you to get the job for the most part, especially if they're external, because they're getting a fee. But if they're internal as well, I mean, they want to be passing along some good people to the hiring manager. The hiring manager could be from a design background. Hopefully they are. Some of them aren't. They may be head of documentation or use product or something else, and they're not really UX people. So they're going to be looking more for a culture fit, making sure that they're not bringing somebody in who, and they obviously skills, but they want to bring somebody in who's going to complement the rest of the team and not just jack everything up. Another designer may be super interested in the details. Like, why did you do this drop down like this? Why didn't you do A/B testing? Why didn't you do this? So it depends on, you've got to kind of think about their different needs and what they're going to be coming at you with.
And you talk quite a bit about this in the book, but maybe could you share what are some ways that people can have their resumes pop to get that HR's attention, early on, keeping in mind, you mentioned in the book that you want to somewhat blend in, like to show that you are part of the industry, but then
it's a fine
also,
line. Yeah. Because you don't want to be so obnoxious that they're like, oh my gosh, like, I seriously saw a resume where there was a giant pink unicorn across the left side of the resume. I mean, so you don't want to be like so obnoxious that they just put you aside. But so you want to play, I mean, it's a game. This is all a game. We're not interviewing as part of unless you're a researcher, but like, you're not interviewing as part of your design job. You're not. So I tell everybody, it's just a game. You might not be good at this stuff, but you kind of have to fake it and do the best you can and try to kind of blend in. You want to at least be apples to apples and not like this orange out there. But at the same time, a lot of people have this really generic, robotic kind of way of talking. in their resume about themselves. They may even talk about themselves in third person, which is really weird. And they'll say things like, I like to build usable, delightful experiences to help people. And it's just so lame and generic, you know?
Yeah.
And so I always tell people, you need to kind of decide, you need to connect the dots for people and decide what you're going to present yourself as. You know, I am an end-to-end designer who can do research, design, testing, visual design, et cetera, like whatever, like, and you need to state that, like, this is what I am. This is what I do. And I always say, you should put that up in the summary, like right under your name, like a couple sentences maybe. And then down in the resume itself, you're going to be talking about accomplishments and outcomes versus just mirroring back a job description of bullet points. Because that's just, everybody can say that. They can say, I created personas, I created wireframes. Well, were they any good? You know, what impact did they have? So if you do that, and if you weave in some of the keywords that you see in the job descriptions that really appeal to you, then you're going to come across as the perfect candidate for that role. And I say, don't be afraid to be funny or add a little bit of, you know, flair, as they would say, to your resume. Like, don't be afraid to have a personality, because these people have to work with you. They're trying to figure out, do they want to work with you or not?
So you mentioned in your book, or you kind of talked through in your book, and you can correct me if I interpreted this incorrectly. You separate or distinguish the skill set of UI designer from UX designer, and I of course understand why. But I'm thinking about like a small UX team, a mid-sized company with somewhat limited resources. Would they typically require, or at least highly value, that skill set in a new hire? So I'm wondering, is that something that someone should be developing?
This is kind of that age-old question, like, should a UX designer code kind of thing. And actually, earlier on, UI and visual design were kind of interchangeable, because if you really look at the whole big thing, like UX is the umbrella, UI is underneath UX, because UX is the entire user experience. UI is the actual interactions on the screen, the colors and the buttons and all that kind of stuff. But it's evolved. Like at my company, the UI team is under engineering, and they are the ones that build the designs. They code the designs, and they figure out all the API, how everything gets hooked up, and they figure out patterns. We use a lot of material design kind of stuff that they can reuse, but they're responsible for building our designs, and we're responsible for designing them and testing them. But at a lot of companies, you'll see like UI/UX designer. When you see that in a role, they're generally not very mature, as a company. And they're also probably looking for somebody who has some of those front end skills. Maybe it's a startup or a small company, you're kind of a UX team of one. So I guess it just depends on, like, for me, I started out as a front end developer, but that's because way back then, it was all, we had to do everything HTML, CSS. And as soon as JavaScript started to come into the picture, and it sounded like the Peanuts teacher to me, like,
I'm out.
I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm out. I like the front end. Like, I like the strategy and doing the flows and the wireframes and all that kind of stuff, but don't make me code it. So I think there's a job for everyone. It just depends on, like, if you really like that kind of stuff, then yes, you can find jobs where they would love that kind of skill set. But I don't think, to me, that's kind of an anomaly for a UX designer. We already have to do so much stuff already. I already have to do my own research. I have to do my own testing, all that kind of stuff. And now I got to code it. That's crazy. So it just depends.
That's like that UX unicorn that you talk about in your
totally.
book. Could you maybe just talk a little bit about that, what those unicorns are, or at least how companies who are seeking those types of individuals are? And then just, I guess the question would be, is it realistic? And should you actually avoid job postings that seem to be seeking these types of people?
If you're looking for a role in UX and you find something like that and you're a good fit and you're willing to take on all that work, then, okay, more power to you. But when I see that kind of stuff, it just scares the hell out of me, because I'm like, they want you to do everything. They want you to do everything, for the same pay as one person. And I don't know, I don't feel, so I'm a generalist. I can do research, wireframe, prototyping, testing, visual design. So, kind of that T thing. But I could go deep in a lot of different things. I could go deep in interaction design. I could go deep in IA. I could go deep in research, not visual design. That would be like, so don't ever ask me to design a logo or anything. But, if people feel like they've got that wide breadth of skills and they want to go work at a startup or something that asks you to do all these things, that's cool. I wouldn't want to do it. It's too much.
So you wrote this book about 3 years ago, correct?
Yeah.
So
before all the COVID stuff?
Yeah. So what in the industry has changed? You kind of touched on a little bit of it, but what's changed in the industry and what's changed in maybe some hiring patterns?
Yeah. Obviously the whole remote thing I don't think anybody needs to worry about going back into an office unless they just really love the office and they really want to be there. Because almost every job I'm seeing, even Microsoft, even Amazon, who never used to have remote jobs, have remote jobs now. And so that's just a big thing, is learning how to collaborate, meet, design, do everything online without ever even, most of my team I've never even met in person. I've met like 3 of them because we had an offsite before COVID, and then we've hired all these new people. My manager, I've only met her like this way. So that's
how long have you guys been remote then? Obviously a long time, but I know a lot of people have been adapting that format, but how long have you guys been doing it for?
Oh, our company's always been remote. So we're part of Dell Technologies, and they've always been really big on trying to migrate everybody to remote. They were kind of way ahead with that. So I've been remote for 6.5 years. And I was remote before that. Almost every company I've worked at has allowed for some kind of remote. So it's not been a big deal for me, but I know a lot of people are trying to figure out how to adapt to that. Even Miro has been exploded at our company in the last year, just being able to talk to people and kind of do that whiteboarding thing without being in a room. So I would think that's a huge thing. And then it was weird. It was like when COVID hit, a lot of UX designers got laid off because people couldn't perceive how are we all going to work this way and whatever. And then lately, right around Christmas, I saw it pick up like crazy. I thought it would be the new year, but it actually happened more right around the holidays. And I think maybe they suddenly had some budget they were trying to use up at the end of the year and realize hey, we can actually do this remote thing. And we actually need our UX designers to come back. And now, there are so many jobs right now. And if you look on LinkedIn and you look at the number of applicants, it'll say 3 instead of 100. It's exploding right now. And I'm seeing a lot of jobs for UX researchers and a lot of jobs for writers, like I said, where I never saw that before. It was just they wanted senior designers who could just kind of come in and hit the ground running, when they were hiring in the past year. And now I'm seeing things opening up for juniors. I'm seeing internships. There's a lot going on right now, which is great.
Maybe just a couple more questions. Maybe one, I'd like to ask about the portfolio. That's such an important piece in getting a job. So what would you suggest including in your portfolio, and maybe what material you should include in there and how much information you should give?
Yeah, you hear a lot of mixed messages about this. Some people say, oh, if you don't have a website and you're a designer, then, I'm not going to take you seriously. But to me, it's not my job to build websites, to literally code websites. It's not my job. So I do have a WordPress website, and it has some about stuff, and it has kind of a high level view of my process, but I don't put my portfolio up on my website. I don't do big, long case studies. I have a PDF portfolio. So I do it in Google Slides, which just cranks out to a PDF, and it's perfect. And then I can move my case studies around and, change things if I want to, customize it. And it's got a password on it because I don't want people to just randomly be, it's not that it's under, a lot of my stuff was under NDA and now it's public. So it's not really under NDA anymore because it's out there in the world, but I still don't want it sitting for anybody to see on my website. So I don't think there's any problem with a PDF portfolio. Or I interview. So this week I'm interviewing 4 people. We're hiring like crazy, and I'm interviewing between 4 and 7 people a week. And when I see portfolios, they could be on whatever Adobe's platform is. I can't remember what it is, or portfolio.io. And then I don't see things on Behance or Dribbble really, because that's not really a place for a case study. It's just to show pretty stuff. I've seen things in Google Docs. I see things in Keynote. Like, it doesn't really matter. And none of my colleagues mind what we get the portfolio in, as long as it's it has a good process and good writing, and like we can follow the story. But in terms of what I would include, I think you could include, three good case studies would be good. Hopefully you have three good case studies. It'd be great if they were really relevant to the job that you were doing. Like, we have a very complex desktop application. We don't do mobile. I mean, it's cybersecurity. Could you imagine trying to look at 10,000 records on a mobile? So we're very focused on, can you do data visualization? Can you do complex present data, complex data? And so if you had a case study that was kind of in line with that, it'd be better to see that than like, here's the e-commerce site I did. You're like, okay, well, that doesn't really apply, to what we're trying to do. And the same thing, like if you are applying for a job that wants mobile, then if you've got mobile experience, make sure you include a mobile case study so that they can see that you've got that. So that's why I like that custom PDF portfolio. And it can be short. It could be 3 to 5 pages. And when I say that, I mean, like, I have giant images and a couple of lines of text in mine. It's kind of it's really a preview. You want them to look at that and go, gosh, we got to get this person in. And I want them to talk me through 1 or 2 of their case studies. And so when you come in and you do your portfolio presentation, I know this seems like a lot of work, but it's kind of a one-time thing. Like, you should create a separate deck for your portfolio presentation and blow out that 3 to 5 page PDF case study into like a 20-page, here's everything, here's the whole story of this project. Add some color, add, some stories, add some more artifacts. And they don't have to be like beautiful artifacts. They could literally be, here's the test script we did in Google Docs. Like, you're just trying to give people a view into what you're like to work with and the kind of things you would produce. So it's really kind of a 3-tier. Like, you could do something on your website if you want to, high level, and then that shorter PDF to catch their attention, and then the longer presentation to really tell a good story. That's how I would do it.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, thanks for all that good stuff.
Well, you're welcome. And a lot of companies are requiring that. Like Amazon, if you interview at Amazon, they will say it's going to be an hour-long meeting. You get 45 minutes to present 3 case studies. Make sure you stick to your time, and they are timing it. And, and then leave a little time for questions. And there's always that 5 minute, everybody comes in late and everybody's talking, and then, you kick it off. And, so you need to have a good deck it doesn't have to be fancy. I literally have seen screens that are just black with some white text on them and a couple screenshots. Like, it doesn't have to be this beautifully designed template or anything like that. It just has to be, we're designers, so it has to look nice. You got to spell everything right. I can't tell you like how many times we've been in an interview and on the side we're like, oh, they misspelled blah, blah, blah. And it just makes you cringe, like little stuff like that. And also, just a little tip too, I can't tell you how many people don't put like what their role was, what the duration of the project was, and who their team was, like who they worked with, and maybe even how the project came to be, like who brought the project to them. They don't set up that context. They just dive right into the project. And we always have to ask. So please put your stuff up, right there at the beginning. Like, I'm going to tell you about this case study because blah, blah, blah. And here's some background and information about the project.
So I guess, so the portfolio, and then there's the resume. So what, would you recommend any tools, building tools or services, and maybe helping you develop your resume?
As far as tools go, I do mine in Google Docs, but I'm also creating a version over in Figma just to play around with it because it's a little easier to move things around. It's definitely easier. Oh, actually, Google Slides, not Google Docs, because in Google Slides, you can move things around and line things up a lot better. Like, have you ever tried to design anything in like Word or something with columns? It's just a lot of people use templates, and that's totally fine as long as you make sure that you change the title, you totally customize, you don't leave anything there that looks like a template because people might miss little things. You also have to make sure that you can actually highlight it and copy and paste it, that it's not a flat image. Like, you don't want to do it in Figma, create a PNG and then a PDF because the whole thing's flat and an ATS wouldn't be able to read it.
That's what I was going to ask about, the ATS, that scan. How do you ensure that your resume is scans well?
Well, everybody's going to hate me because I keep saying like you got to I keep adding things that you have to do. But if you had just a really straightforward Google Docs or Microsoft Word or something, and it's just text, like it's just, and you could just copy and paste that right into the application. I would not apply through LinkedIn or somewhere because you can't customize it at all. It's just going to suck your LinkedIn profile in and send it. Yeah. Whereas if you go to the company's website and you're able to upload a cover letter and you're able to put in, like a customized resume and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be a lot better. But yeah, just make it some kind of text. Actually, I think Microsoft Word, it reads it the best, they say. And then PDFs, some of them don't read PDF. So it's like, I don't know, just to be super safe, use Microsoft Word. Not that we all have Word, but if we're on Mac, but
right, yeah,
or Notepad or text or something.
I guess I won't keep you much longer. I guess maybe my last question is around just boot camps, certification programs. What value are they valuable to have, or are they seen as valuable to employers?
This is so tricky, and I feel bad because a lot of people go to boot camps and they spend a lot of money and they think like, oh, now I'm going to get a UX job. And it does teach you about the process, which is great. There's a lot of UX designers who don't even understand the process that they're supposed to be working in, like the user-centered design process with the whole discovery and, you'll see like the double diamond, or you'll see the boxes and they're all named things. I always do like discovery, define, design, develop, test or measure, or whatever. And so the boot camps do teach you all that stuff. But it's all a lot of book knowledge, and the case studies that you do are following that process exactly. Yeah. And you're not really talking to mostly to product managers, and you're not talking to engineering, and you're not understanding constraints and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of just teaching you the process in a perfect world. It's definitely a good transition if you're trying to come out of marketing or graphic design or something and understand. But I'm not sure that you need to spend that kind of money. You could probably get just as much information reading books and doing stuff online. There's Coursera classes that are really good. I haven't done it yet, but Google has a new UX certificate on Coursera. I'm sure it's got a lot of the same stuff as a boot camp does. Yeah. I really don't value a boot camp experience anymore. If I look at somebody's resume and I'm like, oh, they went to General Assembly, like I don't think it helps that much. In fact, if you put it in your resume as like experience, like it's a job, I can't stand that. I tell coaching people, like, you wouldn't put your English degree work in your experience. It's education. Right. Like it shouldn't be, it's not experience, it's education. Right. So I don't know. I'm not really that hot on the boot camps. I really don't like how they promise people, oh, you'll get a job after 12 weeks of doing this boot camp. But I mean, I do value, I value the process, like how they teach the process. Yeah.
So it's good supplemental perhaps, but not in and of itself.
Yeah. And if you're the kind of person that learns better from, going to class and talking to people and interacting with people versus reading books, then okay. But it's a lot of money to spend to do that. Yes. When there's so many other resources online. And the Nielsen-Norman stuff is really good, although it's really expensive, but getting certified in a Nielsen-Norman, like a 5-day workshop or something, that would be really valuable. Take like their interaction design class or something. That might be more valuable than going to a boot camp. A lot of the boot camps are taught by people who only have a couple years of experience, which is kind of ridiculous. Like how much can you know about UX after 2 years that you could teach it to somebody? Whereas NNG, I mean, they've been doing it for 25 years. So
yeah, they're a fantastic resource, clearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much. So much good advice here for someone who may be interested in maybe entering this field, or maybe someone who's looking to maybe take that next step in their career in this field. So I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
I wanted to thank Lisa again for her time, and thank you for listening to this interview. If you'd like to learn more about Lisa and her work, make sure to check out our website at lisamurnan.com. Also, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel so that you can stay up to date with our latest interviews and content. Otherwise, check out our website at uxrocket.io for other resources. Thanks for listening.